Welcome back to Third Phase of Moon Radio. I'm your host, Dr. J. Andy Elias. We have the godfather of ufology, the one who I like to call Stan the Man Friedman. Welcome back, Stan.
Yay.
And Blake Cousins, I know you had a burning question, and I know you wanted to tell the listeners what's new. And go ahead, Blake.
Certainly, Dr. J. Andy Elias, things are going down right here at Third Phase of the Moon. We posted within the hour the UFO sightings high-speed pursuit UFO over Los Angeles. We just got the video in last night. We spoke with John. We had permission to show it on Third Phase of the Moon and share it to the world, and that's what we're doing right here at Third Phase. I got a couple things I wanted to say also, that Joe Kiernan, right here, our special correspondent, sent in a video that we received again within the past hour of amazing lights over Myrtle Beach, and we'll be showcasing that video tomorrow on Third Phase of the Moon, and it is absolutely incredible. And I'm really happy to have Stanton T. Friedman. Dr. J, you get some really good guests, and Stanton T. Friedman is one of the best out there, and we appreciate him being on Third Phase of the Moon. My question to Stanton is, being that you're a nuclear physicist and technology, what about the future? Nanotechnology is, in its infant stage, but within 20 years from now, it's theorized that the singularity effect will become fact, where beings will be thinking a million times faster than our human brains process at this moment, being that they're going to create new ideas, make medicines that we can't even dream of, possibly even becoming immortal in certain cases of some theories out there. And when we go to other planets such as Mars, possible genetic engineering through nanotechnology, where we'll be able to breathe the environment up there in Mars without spacesuits, therefore becoming Martians. And if we're not aliens already, maybe we will once we get to Mars. What do you think about this, Stanton?
Well, I think we're going to be moving out there if we don't kill ourselves first. I mean, that's the big thing. And also, I think if we go to Mars, and frankly, when I was working in the space industry back in the 60s, everybody I worked with thought that we would have been to Mars before the end of the century and would have a lunar colony by now. And there's been a real failure of leadership as far as I'm concerned. In contrast with the nuclear navy, where Admiral Rickover provided the leadership, and where we, in 56, had a submarine that could go around the world underwater, and where we have nuclear-powered aircraft carriers now that can operate for 18 years without refueling. Think of that. How many ships full of oil, aren't being burned because of that? So I think if we're going to go to Mars, I think it should be a planetary system that goes there, not by a country, but by a planet. It's going to cost money. I mean, people say when I talk about fusion, well, how come we don't have fusion here as a successful means of producing? Because we're not spending the money. It costs money to build advanced systems. Apollo cost, what, $20 billion? And as I've told people before, when I was working on aircraft nuclear propulsion way back in 58, we spent $100 million that year. Employed 3,500 people. It wasn't a little program. 1,100 of them were engineers and scientists. So these things don't happen, with 4 professors and 20 grad students. And in order to spend money, it needed a national purpose. And so if we're going to Mars, we have to make it a goal like Kennedy did with getting a man to the moon and back safely by the end of the decade. We haven't had that kind of leadership. We're NASA's goal, besides keeping the money flowing so they can support more research, it says here in small print. I've been very disappointed with that. I think we ought to be getting ready to establish a base on the moon and send somebody to Mars. And I was kind of surprised, though, back at the turn of the century, that I was in a panel down at Cape Canaveral, Kennedy, if you will, where a NASA guy said they were thinking about the possibility of using nuclear power for an upper stage to get us to Mars. And we have successfully operated nuclear rocket engines on the ground. And what's the big deal? A lot more energy per pound. You can double or triple the payload to Mars if you use a nuclear third stage. But we haven't committed to do that. And
Mr.
that's
Friedman.
the thing. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mark. Okay. we have NASA. We have NASA with everything going really slow without using some kind of nuclear propulsion. Is NASA our official space program? Or is there a government secret space program that is actually going to the moon and back, being quiet about it?
Well, that's a good question, and all I can say is I don't know. That's in my gray basket. I certainly have said that governments can keep secrets. We've been keeping secrets a long time, and I had a letter from a guy in England. The United States is the largest democracy in the world. There's no way it could keep stuff secret. What nonsense. I had to point out that there were 12,000 people in England at Bletchley Park working on we'd broken the German code. Couldn't tell anybody about it, of course, but we were intercepting, decoding, translating, and very carefully distributing that information. Careful, because if anybody knew we'd broken the code, they'd change it, and then we'd be tough out of luck. And correct, there wasn't one word in public for 25 years after that. 25 years. The war was over.
Now, a few years ago, a large triangular-shaped craft was accidentally or intentionally recorded using a night vision camera. This craft had two tail structures angled inward on the very top. It had the three dots, white dots underneath, and a big white dot in the center. This thing was videotaped, and you could see the thrusters underneath the nose of the thing as it was slowly rotating. Then it puts up a huge white ball around it, around the center, below and above, and then disappears. Now,
pretty neat.
I sent that video to a couple of friends. One was a scientist, and he got back to me with something I didn't think he knew about. He said he actually worked underneath these craft. They were called the Black Manta, the TR-3A and B, and that they use a very advanced Tesla coil system to create a space bubble around the ship, allowing them to fold space. Now, have you heard any rumors about these, or have you seen any of these? Because these triangular-shaped craft, they're seen all around the planet. They're over there in Belgium. They were over here on the East Coast. They've been seen many times.
Yeah, and I don't know whether they're ours or theirs. And the one problem you always have with secret systems, what's their purpose? In other words, where do we go from here? What's the point of spending all that money? Now, there's no question that black budgets are huge. That is not under direct congressional control, and people estimate $30 to $50 billion a year on off the books research and development programs.
Mr. Stevens, that makes me think about the Magic Men and the MJ-12. When we had met, you were speaking about the recent progress of that all writing. Can you let us know where you're at with that project?
The Magic Men, that's MAJIC for anybody who worries about such things. Well, we're at the hopeful stage. The book, my book, Top Secret Magic, MAJIC, has been optioned for a movie, along with the book by Don Schmidt and Tom, his buddy, Tom Perry, to make a movie, Magic Men. And it's gone through 4 script rewrites already, and there's a lot of talk going on. And I just heard 3 days ago that Jeff Bridges' agent apparently has asked to look at the script as a possible role playing me, which you believe, which would be kind of neat.
Fantastic.
I've always said I wish Richard Dreyfuss would play me. Jeff Bridges would do fine as far as I'm concerned. He's won one Academy Award, and he gets into his roles. And the point is, the movie would be not a documentary, but be a dramatic movie that, sort of like a combination of JFK and All the President's Men. And I hate to admit this, with 5 books, my name on 5 books, all listed at my website, www.stantonfriedman.com. But a lot of people watch movies. I hate to admit that. And so Bryce Zabel and Donnie Most, remember from, the big program with the Fonz and all that stuff, Happy Days.
Happy Days.
Donnie Most from that. He's working in film production. And there's even a trailer that you can see if you look for it hard on the internet for Magic Men. So what's going to happen, I don't know, but I'm an optimist, partly because the same people have optioned the rights to the book Captured by Kathleen Marden and myself, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience. So if I get very lucky, and I turn 79 in a couple of weeks, if I get very lucky, my parents live to be 90, so I'm an optimist, I will see 2 of my books be turned into exciting, dramatic movies, he says, hopefully.
Fantastic.
So it's exciting, frankly, that they've gone past 4 script write-ups, and that people like Jeff Bridges may get involved. I would be delighted. Because, Hollywood's a very funny place, and there aren't too many physicists kicking around there.
Yes.
I'd like the chance to have some say in something like this.
Now, Mr. Friedman, at the top of the hour, you mentioned about Art Campbell's book and him talking about the 1954 and 55 alien meetings.
Yes. Art has spent a lot of time, he lives on the West Coast, and he spent a lot of time in the plains of San Augustine, about which there was a terrible article in the MUFON Journal this past month. And he also has, would you believe, he found some people who were on Ike's plane crew, the presidential aircraft, And when he was supposedly playing golf, it was a great cover story for Ike, because he did play golf. Well, he was supposedly in the Atlanta area playing golf. The presidential plane, flew him out to Holloman Air Force Base, where he met with aliens. The alien craft was down the end of the field. So his book doesn't point out. I'm waiting for that. But he also has dug into the Edwards Air Force Base and all that sort of stuff. And if you look at all our presidents since Truman, let's say. And Truman's the one who set up Majestic 12, MJ-12. But if you look at all of them, Ike is by far the most likely to have been dealing with aliens. I mean, do you realize people don't give him enough credit? They used to think of him as kind of, he wasn't Eastern establishment type guy, not too bright. Anybody who could, after the war, take on the job of getting Germany to work with England, the United States, and France against the Russians had to have really great skills at convincing people and, get their respect. Because, people forget, we just fought a war with Germany, millions of people killed, and you saying you want them to be on our side? That was not an easy challenge, to say the least.
Now, supposedly, Eisenhower wanted to go public after the 54 meeting with the general population here, but MJ-12 stopped him cold. His great-granddaughter also mentioned that to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to evaluate what she has said. I've heard some of her stuff, and I got a big brave ass again, and I just don't know. There are all kinds of claims being made, and we're not being shown any documents. Now, I've done a lot of work on the Majestic 12 thing, and I'm the first to say there's a whole bunch of phony MJ-12 documents. They don't matter. There's yes, good ones. That's what matters. Most isotopes are fissionable. You know,
Art Campbell is a friend of mine. Yeah, I was on a show with him, Art Campbell. I was on a show with him almost 2 years ago, and he's been keeping me up to date on his book coming out.
He's a good man. I've met with him, and you know, he's been digging, and that's for too much so-called UFO research. It's research by proclamation rather than by investigation, and that's bad show. You need people who dig into this stuff and who are willing to say, you know, I don't know, let's find out, rather than, oh, that sounds good, let's run with it. They're two different attitudes.
Mr. Friedman, with back to the MJ-12, for the people out there that don't know, can you let us know who the MJ-12 are and what their roles are in society, if you will?
Well, the original group was all dead.
Of course.
Basically, what happened is Roswell happened in July of '47. In September of '47, President Truman established this group called Operation Majestic 12, accountable only to him, the president. And they named the document we got, which came in the form of a roll of film, out of the blue, and which shocked us, and most of us, including me, thought it must be a phony because of some of the things that were in it. In particular, it named 12 people, half a dozen scientists, a bunch of intelligence types, first three directors of Central Intelligence, Secretary of Defense, Forrestal, etc. But there was one name that was particularly distressing. One of the scientists was supposedly Dr. Donald Menzel, M-E-N-Z-E-L, a Harvard professor of astronomy. Also, somebody who wrote 3 anti-UFO books. How could he, in the first place, be part of a group that obviously everybody else had a high-level security clearance? And you must understand you don't need to have a high-level security clearance to teach astronomy at Harvard or anyplace else for that matter. How could he be part of such a group that knew that alien bodies had been recovered and alien craft and so forth? And so I've spent a lot of time. I started off thinking I'd show that these were phony documents. I didn't like Menzel when he was alive. I had one run-in with him at Harvard. Funny story, I called to invite him to a lecture I was given that evening to an engineering alumni group at Harvard. And because I had no idea whether they had invited the public or just the members of the group, stuff like that. So I called and gave him my name. Oh, I know all about you. What? You saw my congressional testimony next to yours? No, I've seen letters and memos. You can't be a scientist and believe in flying saucers, he says to me on the phone.
Oh, geez.
And so I laughed. I said, surely you're not serious, Dr. Menzel. He was serious. So I laughed. And he started to rant, and I said, look, I didn't call to argue with you. I called to invite you out of courtesy. It's your campus. And, oh, well, of course I won't be there. And I told this story that night, just so they'd know that I wasn't afraid of them. Anyway, I found a couple of items that suggested maybe Menzel was on the inside. And I got permission from 3 different people to see his papers at Harvard. All these guys were dead. And I was totally shocked, frankly, to find that he wrote Jack Kennedy, whom he knew because Kennedy had been on the board of overseers at Harvard, saying that Menzel had a longer continuous association with the National Security Agency, those big black budget agencies, of anybody in the country 30 years as of that time. When we are properly cleared to each other, I can tell you more, he said. And it turned out he was a world-class cryptographer. He did classified work for 20 different companies. Nobody knew any of this stuff. And so I had to get permission from his wife to read his unpublished autobiography. But I wound up being convinced that Menzel belonged in that group. His first book was translated into Russian, hopefully to keep them from digging into the subject. So the other members, Dr. Vannevar Bush was one of the most prominent. He was the top scientist to Truman. He was there at the first atomic bomb test. He was head of several organizations that really delved into advanced technology during the war. He was top dog. And then there were people from MIT, just some really outstanding people. And I found that a number of the documents that turned up were phony. But the primary document, the Eisenhower briefing document of November 18th, 1952, that was after the election of Eisenhower, but before he took office, which was January 53. I've listened to all the objections and can't find any of them meeting anybody's standard for sensibility. And it was kind of crazy, some of the arguments that were made. I have to mention that Mr. Philip Klass, who was the noisiest negativist, challenged me on one of the three documents that I say is genuine. The typeface is wrong. It's done in the large pica type, but the National Security Council used only a leet type. And I challenge you, he said, to find any other documents done in the same size and style type. I am so confident of what I'm saying that I will give you $100 each for every genuine such document, up to a maximum of 10. You got 60 days, Friedman. Ha ha! I was going to our library. He'd never been there. He had gotten 9 documents by mail. They were all elite type. I was going there. I found 14 done in the same size and style pica type that he didn't think existed or was being used. And I sent him copies and an invoice for $1,000 because $100 maximum of 10. And he paid me. But he told everybody about challenging me, and nobody about paying me, and got very angry when I included a copy of his check and 2 things that I wrote.
But you had every right to do so, because that check, once it was tendered and once it was cashed, became public property. And, of course, I thought that was one of the greatest things. With what you had with Menzel, at the face of it, having a skeptic, that right there, if you really logically think about it from the CIA standpoint, that is a perfect cover. An astronomer professor who's a debunker. So I'm glad you were able to uncover that. It seems right now we just got 2 more new callers, but I want to inform everybody we're coming to a break in a couple minutes. So callers, stand by. We're going to take your calls when we come back, ask your questions. I wanted to ask something, Mr. Friedman, about it might go on to after the break, but what happened with the citizen hearing? Because it was such an integral role that you played, and with all the witnesses. We had Jesse Marcel Jr. on a few weeks ago, and he was discussing.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and Captain Solace, right when he came back.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
And what I saw, we covered it from Third Phase of Moon, and from the beginning of the event with these 5 congressmen, retired congressmen and senator, they were skeptics. By the end, Senator Gravel, closing argument after the hearing was done, the video that's going around that Stephen Bassett had, he is so convinced. He straight out said that, yes, there's an extraterrestrial presence, and yes, we're being engaged on Earth, and yes, the government is covering it up. Now, why has that not yet hit the world? Do you think the citizens' hearing has died? Do you think this push can still be brought out to the world? Because sadly, from the beginning of the week, nobody was covering it, but finally it took 5 days for the New York Times to come cover it. But you didn't see it on
You noticed that.
Yeah, I didn't see it on CNN, Fox News, or where it should have belonged. No. And that's pathetic. And it really is. And I wanted to ask your comment on that. I'm sure it's going to lead right into the break, and then we'll come right back, take it back, and take the callers.
I was disappointed, of course, that the Washington Post didn't carry anything. The hearings were open to the public, and there was no charge. They should have been swamped with people, and they weren't. I think that people are waiting for the movie that was supposed to be made. Remember, they were broadcasting that? It's supposed to go out on several languages, but only a couple. Well, the movie still isn't available. And I think if that was available and was played, I think we have an awful lot of people who'd be wowed, by the testimony. So I think there's more work to be done, but I'm still an optimist.
I am too, and for that matter, we are going to be promoting it. We're going to have Bassett on, we're going to have Solace back on, everybody on. And everybody stay tuned. We'll be right back for more Phase. We are back to Third Phase of Moon Radio live right here on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Dr. J. Andy Elias. Co-hosting today with me is special correspondent to Third Phase of Moon for the East Coast, Joe Kiernan. And we are speaking with the godfather of ufology, who I like to call Stan the Man Friedman. We're also joined by a caller, I believe it's Bob, and we have a new caller from area code 502. Welcome to Third Phase of Moon, and what's your name?
My name is Hans. Good evening, Dr. Andy Elliott. I'm one of the producers on Revolution Radio, and we had a couple of questions that came from the chat, and I wanted to basically get your thought or your opinion on thorium.
Do you know that, Mr. Friedman?
I missed what he said. What about thorium? Is that what he said?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Thorium is another element besides uranium or plutonium, but thorium is naturally occurring, that can be used, if you're clever enough, to build a nuclear power reactor. And there's been a lot of talk over the years about having a thorium-based nuclear program instead of uranium-based. You can get away from proliferation concerns. You don't make plutonium and stuff like that. And all of these things take money. And it's a question of who's going to spend the money and where do we go from here. And I should add that one of the things, and this goes for fusion too, no power company is going to want to build a system that's going to cost a lot of money that he can't be sure will operate for, 10, 20, 30 years. If you say, well, it may only run for 6 months, they're not going to invest the money because it's big bucks up front. So thorium has been around. People have talked about it. There's quite a bit of thorium on the planet. It's not a rare kind of thing. Not like those heavy elements I mentioned, rhenium and osmium and stuff like that. And it can be used for a nuclear program. And, where we're going with nuclear power right now, there's all this bit with attacking carbon, evil CO2, when obviously a nuclear power plant doesn't produce CO2. And I hate to say it, but I can't think of CO2 as being evil. Every growing thing on this planet, every tree, every blade of grass requires CO2. So I don't want anybody saying evil CO2. And there's a chapter in my book, Science Was Wrong, about the so-called anthropogenic global warming, man-caused. And it isn't. I just saw a recent article. Most of the CO2 that's out there came from that big volcano that went off Iceland there. It had nothing to do with what man was doing, unless you blame man for the volcano, which I am not about to do. So, the justification. I like nuclear. It can be operated safely. I worked on the commissioning of the pro-nuclear generating station here in New Brunswick, Canada. And I think anybody who thinks we can build windmills and solar plants that can compete without subsidy, mind you, I think they're wrong. It's just not in the natural thing. Sure, they should be used where it's appropriate. If you're in the desert in California, boy, there's an awful lot of sunshine up there, not doing much good, But yes, if you talk about, I got to subsidize everything, which they were doing in England and Germany and stuff, and they realized it was costing the people a ton of money, that's another story. I had somebody, this is crazy. I live in Fredericton, New Brunswick. In the winter, it gets down to 30 to 40 below zero here. A lot of snow. 1 year, 13 feet altogether. And there was somebody who said, what we need is solar-powered water heaters on the roofs here. And all I could think of is, who's kidding who? They were going to cost $3,500. What do you do about all that snow in the winter, And, of course, you need another system because I hate to tell people this, but the sun doesn't shine all the time. The wind doesn't blow all the time. So it sounds great. Look, solar energy is free, Stan, and the wind is free. Sure, but the conversion systems aren't, and they're not terribly reliable.
You know, Mr. Friedman, as we've been saying throughout the show, you have inspired so many people, and we are taking calls from around the world. We got 2 more. I just want to let everyone know in about 10 minutes, Dr. Lear is going to be joining us for the last 10 minutes of the show with one of the...
Fantastic.
So, real quick, I would like to get the 2 callers, if you could briefly ask your question to Mr. Friedman. We'll start with caller 805. Welcome to Third Phase. Moon, how are you?
Hello? Oh, hello there.
Good. You got a question for Mr. Friedman?
I just wanted to wish him the best of the day. This is Dr. Lear.
Oh, Doc, how are you? Dr. Lear. I didn't recognize your voice.
Yeah, I recognize Stan's voice, though, so I figured I'll call a couple minutes a day and find out how the snow was.
We don't have any snow yet. Come on.
I know.
We don't know what that is in California.
I wish.
Yeah, I know. I lived out there.
We have one other caller, caller 831. You have a question for anybody on this panel? Caller 831.
Yes. Hello?
Yes, you're live right here at Third Phase of Moon Radio with Stanton Friedman and Dr. Roger Lear.
Hey, how are you guys doing? Well, I was told to call for the last 30 minutes of the show, so I really don't know like what the story is. I was just here to tell you about my encounter with a flying humanoid, but
I could briefly tell it so we could get back to the panel. Go ahead and tell your story real quick. We'd love to hear it.
Oh, okay. Because one time, right now I'm 26 years old, and then at the time I was 6 years old at the time, and me and my brother were like living in a ranch area, like away from the town. And what happened was like in back of that place, like during 4th of July, we're just looking at the people pop the fireworks, and then we looked up. And then I seen something like going in circles, and well, like, cause me, I thought it was a witch because I was real small, and to me it looked like someone in a broom, but what it really was, it was like I seen a person and it was hunched back, and I don't know what it was I don't know what it was driving, but like they like if whatever was in back of the whatever it was riding, like in back of them, like it had like a little heated thing, and then it wasn't the sun reflecting against the that thing because it was already dark, and it was all in black, and it was just going pretty fast, moving like left to right, and it was about like maybe like 200 feet away, and I don't know, and that's something I'll never forget.
You know, that's an amazing thing that you said, because someone was on here not long ago and actually was talking about some footage shows flying humanoids. Now, sadly, with our technology these days, we don't know what's photoshopped and what's not. But when people like you are witnessing something and coming forward talking about this, we hope it inspires others. And we thank you very much for having this. Now, I want to go back to Stanton Friedman real quick. We want to thank you very much for being on the show. You're always, welcome. We'd like to have you back, and stay on by all means. And Dr. Lear has joined us, and from now we have Victoria and Barbara on the phone. Victoria is producing Contact in the Desert. This is a huge, huge event. The guest list is so big. Dr. Lear's going to be there. George Norrie, Dr. Greer, Giorgio Tsoukalos, David Wilcock, so on and so on. Barbara and Victoria, can you tell us a little bit more? And as you know, we got Dr. Lear on and we got Stanton Friedman on.
Hi, guys. It's great to hear from you again. I've known Dr. Lear for many, many years. Hi there. This is Barbara. And I'm Victoria. Listen, I have some amazing news for you, John. First of all, I want to let your audience know that this site, that this UFO conference is going on, was specifically chosen for this event. Well, first of all, we're on an aquifer, okay? And you know that the pyramids are all on an aquifer as well. And what it does is it gives off a very intense magnetic field. The other thing is we have 17 vortices on the property. Those are vortexes. And another very important thing is that we have a very highly active night sky, which I'm sure many of your audience would like to know. But I have some other very, very important news for you that I did not share with you earlier, and I really need Barbara to pass that on to you. So listen very carefully to the numbers she's going to give you. Go ahead, Barbara.
Hi there. You know, I come from a historical background, and I like to do a lot of research into many different areas. And one of my backgrounds is the Morongo Basin. And this particular basin and the desert itself is basically a spiritual mecca. And for those who don't know this desert, it has a lot to do with the migration of, Cabot and Desert Christ Park and the Integratron, Giant Rock. In the early 30s and 40s, there was this migration of spirituality that came to this desert. But you often wonder why. What had drawn these people here? And as I do my research and I look into this, what drew people here, there is something very, very unique, especially about the Joshua Tree Retreat Center. Has anybody ever heard of the 33rd parallel? And the Joshua Tree Retreat Center sits on the 33rd parallel. And if you haven't heard about that, it is one of the most active parallels on the Earth. Have you ever heard of the 33rd parallel?
Actually, yes, I have. And I believe Jordan Maxwell even mentioned it, made a link between that and the Masonic 33rd degree. And I also was hoping you could talk about the George Van Tassel, which, Mr. Friedman, I know you're aware of, and Dr. Lear, since living in California too, you all know about this Van Tassel and the Integratron as well, right?
Yes.
I was out there. I spoke twice. I spoke
You did?
twice at Van Tassel. Oh, yes. That's how old I am.
How young you are, you mean?
Oh, come on.
And,
yes, but with the George Van Tassel, that's what really ties into all this, because at the 33rd parallel and with the work George Van Tassel was doing, it was so vital and so important because basically it was all happening at the same time Roswell was going on. And the work George Van Tassel was doing, he was talking about the stuff of X-Files and bringing to our attention, and the contactees were bringing to our attention things that were happening way back then that, are just commonplace nowadays. So, and as with the 33rd parallel and the Joshua Tree Retreat, where this particular piece of property sits, it sits on the same parallel as Roswell. And it also sits on the same parallel as the Great Pyramid of Giza. So, this particular energy field here shares a lot of the same energy as those places over the rest of the world. And
I'd like to add, Barbara, something to that, a short little story about George Van Tassel. I've been to Brazil many times, and one of the first times I was there, I met a gentleman who came in with kind of a tattered little leather coat carrying a briefcase. May also sort of a cracked leather. And he spoke a bit of English, and he reached into the briefcase, and he pulled out a whole stack of letters and said to me, Dr. Lear, he says, I think you would be interested in these. And so he handed them to me, and I could see they were handwritten in English, and guess who they were from? George Van Tassel.
Wow.
George Van Tassel. Wow. And what he was trying to do is to establish another base in Brazil.
For all the listeners out there, we got about 10 minutes left, but I was wondering if anybody here on the panel can talk about briefly what George Van Tassel did, the encounter he had with these beings that told him to build this. Anybody?
Well, one thing I should say, when I went out there, I was living in Southern California, of course, and I did a lot of checking on Van Tassel, and I found that a lot of the claims were spurious, if I can put it that way, that George was not always telling the full truth about what was going on. I mean, I hate to imply that somebody was a con man, but he was. There were lots of them at that time, if you recall. And so he told a good story. I'm not saying he was a bad guy. You know, if you met with him, he was friendly and all that stuff. But I would say you need a big box of salt when you listen to whatever George said, because it was not always establishable as true.
I can address that. I can address all that when I'm going to be speaking on George Van Tassel and the Integratron on Friday at 9:30 at the conference. And I can address all those questions you have. I have the FBI file of George Van Tassel, and I also have quite a few local oral histories that the locals have talked about George Van Tassel and their take on him. So I do cover both sides of it, and as a historian, that's part of my job, to look at both sides and present both sides to people. And I also just pulled out a book to show Barbara here, the book by George Van Tassel, The Council of Seven Lights. I have an original copy here I'm looking at.
While we're talking about this real quick, Victoria, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody what's going to be happening, what they can expect that's coming up on August 9th and 11th. And I just want to tell all the listeners out there that we are going to be doing a ticket promotion right here from Third Phase of Moon. You can get all the information from contactinthedesert.net/Third Phase of Moon. We'll be giving the tickets away from the listeners here weekly, and stay tuned and be watching the website. But Victoria, go ahead and tell everybody what to expect. And Dr. Lear, you too.
Well, absolutely. This is going to be very exciting. First of all, Dr. Lear will be speaking as well, so we're really excited to have him. We have, as you had mentioned before, George Norrie, Stephen Greer, Giorgio Tsoukalos, from Ancient Aliens, David Wilcox, Graham Hancock will be live streamed from London. We have Jim Mars, Michael Hellinger, Michael Sala, William Henry, Jason Martell, love that guy, David Sereda, Marshall Clarkfield. The list just goes on and on. Michael Cremo, Carol Rosen, Richard Dolan, William Brown, Travis Walton, all your favorites, Laura Eisenhower, Delitos, Alfred Weber, Yvonne Smith, Paolo Harris, Celeste Yarnell, and of course our friend here, Barbara Harris, Mark Peebler, Suzanne Teeler, Doc Wallach, Mike Luckman. I mean, this is going to be an amazing A-list team. We've got workshops, we've got lectures, and most importantly, we have Barbara here that will be taking everyone on tours to the giant rock itself, passing through the Integratron. So those are the people who are coming out here. They're going to have so much to do. So it's going to be full. Then we've got Killerland going to be doing a call-in where they're going to do a complete, I forget what the name of it, Barbara, when you actually call them in. It's like, I know it's fifth contact. Basically trying to contact, and then we have a special event on Sunday night with Stephen Greer. And Stephen Greer is going to be doing Contact in the Desert as well. So we have Contact in the Desert by James Killerland in the amphitheater that night with the open night stars. And you know what I almost forgot to tell you? That we have the Perseid meteor showers. I mean,
yes.
What more can you ask for? Okay. So we are very fortunate. We have a beautiful clear night sky. The moon will be absolutely perfect to watch them. And who knows what we called in.
Fantastic.
It's going to be a great event. Third Phase of Moon will be covering it. And the lineup sounds great. What else can you tell us, Victoria, about where the listeners can get some more information? I know I told them the website, but is there a Facebook page or anything else?
Yeah, again, the most information, of course, is at the website, which is contactinthedesert.com or contactinthedesert.net. Our number is 760-365-8371. That's 760-365-8371.
Good. I hope all the listeners got it. We're getting a little feedback here. I believe I can get that. Okay, we are good about that. Sorry about that, folks.
Okay, you want the number again?
Yeah, go ahead and give it out to all the listeners again.
Sure. Okay, it's 760-365-8371. That's 760-365-8371.
Now, let me gear this question towards Mr. Friedman and Dr. Lear. Obviously, we've been waiting for disclosure for decades, and as you two gentlemen know, for long before I've been born. Do you think with the citizen hearing finally happening, with what we were saying 30 minutes ago about the citizen hearing, the DVDs coming out, and they keep this alive by promoting it, talking about what Senator Gravel said and how these congressmen and senator were transformed into believing. Do you think we're on the verge of contact? Is this going to happen at this event, or what is it going to take for it to happen?
I think it's going to take some enterprising newsmen like Woodward and Bernstein to look at the facts that the major media haven't published. The 156 NSA top secret Umbra UFO documents that have never been published. You can read one sentence per page. A whole bunch, dozens of pages of CIA top secret Umbra documents on which you can read a few words like that.
Yeah.
And it also, if they would play up what was said by General Carol Bolander.
I don't know, bro.
Sorry, that was
who said that reports of UFOs which could affect national security aren't part of the Blue Book system. That's an astonishing statement, yet no major media group has pointed it out. I spoke with him. I don't think anybody else has, but I spoke with him. He's dead now, Carol Bolander, but he was an Air Force general. This wasn't some punk off to the side with nothing better to do than make up stories. I've got copies of his memo. It shouldn't take much to blow the argument that no cover-up out of the water entirely. It's easy to show the lies from the Secretary of the Air Force in 1955. They're there. I mean, like it or not. So I think unless somebody does what Woodward and Bernstein did for the political Watergate, for the cosmic Watergate, I don't think it's going to happen. And I appreciate the congressmen. I certainly agree that they were, how shall I put it, converted, if you will. But remember what they suggested was that rather than going to Congress, these are all ex-congressmen, mind you, we go to the United Nations. And I was the only one there who had previously spoken to Congress, provided testimony at congressional hearings, and also spoke twice at the United Nations. And I think there's more hope there because back then, 78, the first UN General Assembly, they were very responsive to what we had to say, but the United States was the big boy on the block and managed to keep them from doing anything about it. I don't think the U.S. wields as much power now. So I think there'd be more chance of something good coming out of that than than the situation was in 1978. So I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, but who knows what's going to happen? I don't know.
Mr. Friedman, thank you again for joining us right here at Third Phase of Moon Radio. Dr. Lear, was a pleasure to have you even for a few minutes. We had you again the other day, and both of you guests, we'd love to have you back on. Victoria and Barbara, this is not the end with you. We will be covering you and your event in the weeks leading up to it. We're going to be doing the ticket giveaway. One last time, if anyone's captured anything amazing, send it to us via Skype or Facebook at Third Phase of Moon. contactinthedesert.net/Third Phase of Moon for the ticket giveaway. contactinthedesert.net, where you'll find the full lineup, how to get your tickets, hotel accommodations, and anything else. Any final words? No?
My website is www.stantonfriedman.com.
That's right, and everybody watch out and for that, and Dr. Lear's website as well, which is drlear.com or alienscalpel.com, and we'll be back Third Phase of the Moon next week. Join us again for the next episode.